Alrighty, it is a brand new edition of Flyers Daily with Jason Myrtetus for October 22nd, 2025. Flyers Daily presented as usual by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Flyers not in action tonight. They will be back in action coming up tomorrow. They're going to hit the road jack for a little tilt against the Ottawa Senators tomorrow night in Ottawa. It's a one-game trip up and back. It'll be at 7 o'clock coming up on Thursday night. And then they're back at the Xfinity Mobile Arena for matinee hockey on Saturday at 12:30 against the New York Islanders. Then Pittsburgh on the Tuesday the 28th, and Nashville. The Preds come in Thursday, October 30th, to round out the month of October, the first month of the season. And where the Flyers sit right now is, I guess, well, it depends on what happens following the recording of this podcast. But right now, Flyers would technically be in a wild card spot, wild card number 2. Through 6 games, a record of 3, 2, and 1, 7 points, 1 point back of the Caps, who've also played 6 games. And they are +2 in goal differential, 1-2 straight. Have scored 18 goals and allowed 16 goals. So that's where they are at this early juncture of the season. You know what I didn't check actually today before doing the podcast was how much those 2 power play goals changed the Flyers' power play percentage, because going into the game last night, they were 32nd in the NHL at 6.7%. And while the power play looked better, it statistically was actually worse. But 2 power play goals in the game against Seattle, one by Tyson Foerster, another by Tyson Foerster, and then changed to Noah Cates. Now has the Flyers moving up considerably in the power play rankings to 22nd in the NHL. And just by way of a small sample size and 2 power play goals in one game, 15.8%, 22nd in the NHL. Need to keep that kind of production going. You hope that getting those power play goals starts to give it some rhythm to finishing them off. They had a lot of power plays that look good, but didn't result in a goal. And actually, the first one that they got in the game against Seattle, the Tyson Foerster power play goal, was on a power play that didn't look good, but they ended up scoring on. Maybe that's what gets it going. Hockey can be a very, very strange sport. Coming up in just a couple minutes, joining us will be former Flyers beat writer Sam Carchidi at Broad Street Bull. He's got a new book out, which we're going to discuss with him, some of the inside stories, called Bullies, Catching Up with the Hound, the Hammer, and the Stanley Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers. It really covers a lot of stuff that stories and inside that has never been told, including stuff about the Soviet game, the Red Army game, and much more. So we'll talk to Sam about the upcoming or the book that's out now coming up in just a couple of minutes. But I did put out a tweet also yesterday asking the question, and we'll probably get to more of these tomorrow as well, because I put out the tweet not that long before recording, saying, what's the biggest surprise so far this season for the Flyers? It can be anything, good, bad, something you expected or something you didn't expect, and to drop them here. So we'll get to a few of those. So let's start out with this one from Nick. He says, good, Tippett, Vladar, overall team play. I agree. Tippett's been a really refreshing start. And it's not only the numbers, the 5 goals in 6 games, it's the way it looks. He looks like he's playing well. You can see it, and he's got confidence, and he's really moving on the ice. Overall team play has been pretty good. Vladar's been very good as well. He said the bad has been Mishkov's ice time. Not Mishkov, but his ice time. And again, I'm one of those believers that if a guy is struggling and doesn't have his legs, I don't think you give him more ice time to help him out. I think you protect the player in that situation. And if for whatever reason he doesn't have his legs because he had an ankle injury or whatever, then I'm going to protect the player as a coach. I'm not just going to keep throwing him out there. I don't think that's the solution. So maybe Nick and I disagree on that. I'm not sure. But he said, overall, I thought the defense played better in the regular season, but it's not sustainable with Sanheim playing half the game. Something we talked about in yesterday's episode. They got to bring that total down. And now that Cam York's back, maybe that comes down a little bit. He played 24 minutes and change against Seattle, much more palatable than the 29:58 he played in the Minnesota game, almost 30 minutes in that game. That isn't sustainable. It's just too many minutes to play, especially because he plays penalty kill and obviously a ton of 5-on-5. Those are hard minutes. So got to get that usage with Sanheim. And maybe part of that is also resolving the third pairing. So you have a level of trust where you can play them a little bit more and not have to lean on that top pair so much. Philly Bucks tweeted and said, I didn't expect Vladar to be much. A lot of people didn't. He said, making me and his teammates feel like they can trust him. He definitely has some things to clean up, but what an improvement. Yeah, look, we didn't see a lot of Vladar here in Philadelphia. He's out in Calgary the last bunch of years, and you're not staying up till 12:30, 1 in the morning watching Calgary games. And his usage last year at the end of the year is crazy. We talked about it. The last 11 games that he appeared in last year, all of them on the road and against really good teams. They were shielding Dustin Wolf and putting him, and mind you, Calgary was in a playoff race at the time. And he had a 6-4-1 record in his last 11 games, a .916 save percentage, performed really well. And I think they've cited it, that was part of the reason why they looked at him in free agency and came to an agreement. So Vladar has been a breath of fresh air. He's been very good. His game looks refined. And like you said, Philly Bucks, there are some things to clean up in his game. But overall, he's performed really well with the Flyers here early on. McPole says the same thing. Vladar is the most obvious. He says, but Gulbenkian tops because Vladar had a sample size playing in the NHL. Vladar never played more than 30 games. He said Gulbenkian came out of nowhere and earned a spot over Bump. Well, Gulbenkian, I don't look at him as coming out of nowhere. When they made the deal with Toronto for Scott Lawton in the first-round pick and Gulbenkian, it was that Gulbenkian was really close to being NHL ready, and it was going to be up to him. So to me, didn't really come out of nowhere. I think he's looked really good at times. I think there's some things to clean up with his game, but you can't deny the fact that he just always seems to be around it. He has a good hockey sense. He's around the net or around the puck at the right times. And I think that's just, he's obviously very early in his NHL career. That part's going to grow and grow and grow. So I'm looking forward to watching that development. And I haven't sat down with him yet. I know he's got a big personality, and a lot of people have done that interview with him where they get him really goofy and stuff. I'm not really interested in doing that interview with him. I just want to kind of talk to him, have a conversation, and get to know him, and expose you guys to him as well. But I'm not into that. Like, let's see how goofy we can make him, because that's what people have done and kind of ad nauseum at this point. Savalin Forrest tweets in and says, good. Cooch looks pre-injury. Pretty close. Tippett discovers his man body. Tippett is being more physical, no doubt about that. And I think that creates more space for him, and he doesn't need much space. He says Drysdale looks stronger and dialed in. Vladar's had a fantastic start. The Cates line, all three have taken another step. Totally agree with that. Bobby Brink especially. He said Zegras a promising start. Even though Zegras doesn't have a goal, he does have 5 assists. And I saw this quote that Charlie O'Connor tweeted out from Rick Tocchet. And I screenshotted it. It says, Tocchet on Zegras. He's a smart kid, but what I like about him is that he knows there's more. Like, he texted me last night and said, I want to watch some video with you. He wants it. You can tell, because he feels there's plays out there that he can make even more. You do love that. Zegras firing off a text to Talk saying, hey, I got some video I want to watch. I think we can get more out of something. That's somebody who's bought in. One of the things, we don't know a lot about Zegras. There was a lot of, I think, preconceived notions about Zegras. It is a promising start, and we've seen his skill already take the stage on a number of occasions. He is super skilled. He'll get his goals. Savlin also goes on to say York looks quicker and hungry. York did also come in a little lighter this year, to look a little quicker, to have that a little bit more of a burst on that first step. Power play has potential. Team D is impressive, and Grebs has shined. Gulbenkian, I guess he means by Grebs. Not everybody agrees with you on York. There was a guy that commented on our YouTube that said York's looked bad on several occasions. People keep telling me York is good. York has high potential, but I'm not seeing it. He's looked bad. He's not an NHL starter. He needs to go. From the business GM perspective, he said, any and all comments I make are about play, not the person. Cam seems like a great guy, as does everyone on the current roster, but being a good guy isn't enough to give an NHL roster. I did totally disagree. I think 2 years ago, last year, I thought was uneven for Cam York. He hurt the shoulder early in the season, and I just thought he was chasing his game all year last year. And then when he did come back, there was obviously not seeing eye to eye with the coach, which is pretty apparent. Then also just not feeling confident in his body, kind of chasing it all year. I don't feel like he ever got his game into the sweet spot last year. But 2 years ago, averaged about 24 minutes a night. Was tremendous for the Flyers off the rush. So that year, he played all 82 games, 23-24. He had 30 points. He was averaging 22-37 on the ice a game. Not a power play guy at that time either. And getting the top line of the opposition every night. He's a really good rush defender for two reasons, I think. Number one is three reasons. He reads the play really well. He's really balanced in the way he skates, doesn't overcommit, very under control skater. It's very almost leisurely the way he skates and doesn't get himself out of his body out of position because of that. Doesn't lunge, overcommit. Is very patient with dealing with players coming in off the rush. And I think he's got a good stick. And despite the fact that he's kind of a really chill kind of California guy, there's a lot of confidence and competitor in there. It was one of the things John Tortorella questioned about him. Is there a killer in there? And would that be what holds him back? I think Cam York has a ton of potential. So I totally disagree with Joe Frazier on our Twitter channel, or the YouTube channel, who said that he's not a pro. I couldn't disagree more. I think he's a guy that's built to play alongside a top defenseman on a top pair. Also because I think he's a guy that can handle the minutes. He knows how to economize energy and not waste energy or waste movement when not needed. And I also do think he does need to be on the power play. I think it's important for him to be on the power play. So that's part of the equation also for me. That's been a frustration of mine that he hasn't seen more playoff time. Now, Savelin Forrest didn't just have all those good things to say. He also said, here's the bad. He said Michkov didn't show up looking stronger and faster like Brink has the past two off seasons. Brink really showed up this offseason at another step too. And that's now 3 years post the hip surgery, which is kind of along that timeline. For whatever reason, Michkov hasn't hit stride. It doesn't look like he has his legs like he's had in the past. I thought he looked like he had his legs a lot more in Seattle. He said TK's slow start is only a concern because of his slow finish last season, combining the two. Although got his first goal the other night against Seattle. Hopefully that gets him going because you need that production from Travis Konechny. And he said the bottom D pair is still not dependable. I think Juleson's been fine so far, kind of doing his job. But it's been the rotation of partner. It's not settled on. And maybe that's going to be part of the equation. I don't know. But they need to find a combination there that they have a level of trust in that they can put out there for a certain amount of minutes a night so they don't have to play York and Sanheim 26, 27, 28, 29 minutes so often because that's not sustainable. And he said Andre needs to start developing at the NHL level. So that's Savelin Forrest checking in on that as well. Good stuff there. Let's get to another one here. Again, these are the things that you're surprised about. Good, bad, things you expected, you didn't expect. David says good, Darth Vladar and Owen Tippett. Bad, Michkov's slow start. Plot says surprised with the quality of Drysdale's defensive game. I think Drysdale's done a good job. Never going to be a stalwart defenseman. No doubt about that. But I think he's done a good job using his legs to get himself out of spots. He can skate himself out of jail when he gets trapped in. And sometimes you need to just skate your way out of it. You can't just try and pass out of it. When pressure's coming in or certain teams running a 2-1-2 or crashing down the boards, can't just rim it. I think he's used his legs better in that regard as well. And he looks bigger and stronger as well. Jim said the emergence of Darth Vladar. We got to get Vladar to embrace this Darth Vladar thing. You guys know when I had him on, when he first signed with the Flyers, I asked him about it. Doing a mask, a Darth Vader mask, because it's Darth Vladar. He said, I never saw Star Wars. So I'm on the case. Don't worry about it. Tom says the power play looks dangerous for the first time in a decade. The percentage is low so far. It's actually up to 15.7 now, 22nd in the league. But this power play won't cripple the team like the last 5 years. Yeah, it's looked a lot better. And those 2 power play goals obviously help because we're still in a very small sample size. I said it would be top 17 in the NHL. It's 22nd now. We'll see where it goes. There's a lot of runway left. David Neville said pre-injury Coots is back. Sean Couturier is leading the team in points. And to me, he's been very consistent. His game has kind of looked the same in every game so far for the Flyers this season. It hasn't been uneven where he just piled it up in one game where like he had that 5-point game last year. He's got 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points. He's played with a mixture of different line combinations, pretty much always with Konechny, but a different winger. He's playing just about 20 minutes a night. It's kind of just Sean Couturier. It's what he's doing. And he's looked good for him so far. The big question when it comes to Couturier, of course, though, is going to be, can he sustain it? Because of the body and the wear and tear. We'll see. He got off to a good start a couple of years ago. As a matter of fact, I think it was through the first 16 or first 30 games, he had similar numbers to the year that he won the Selke, but it wasn't sustainable that year. Now we're a few more years removed, though, from the back surgeries. So what is Couturier per 82? We know what he's been through 6 so far this season, and I'm not expecting him to be a point-per-game player. He's got 7 points now, but he has looked good. That is absolutely a positive. Dave Crowder said the power play, for sure. It's definitely looked better. It really has. It's looked a lot better, and that's been a good thing about this team so far. Also, the DM comes in from Kevin, who I DM with often. He says he loved the energy the team is playing with right now. Couturier, Sanheim, Vladar, and the Cates line all leading the way. Tippett and Tyson look ready to have a breakout season. Both of them are off to good starts, and both are traditionally slow starters when it comes to scoring. He says Zegers adds desperately needed playmaking, and I never realized just how good his hands were. He said Drysdale and York look way better than last year. Bobby Brink looks faster. There's no doubt about that. And more aggressive. No doubt about that either. Although he did lead the team in checks last year. He said Grabenkin's been a breath of fresh air. Good start, in my opinion. And let's get 39 rolling again and look out. Great work on the pod as always, brother. Let's go Flyers. Yeah. If they can get Mishkov going, and he will, he'll get going. I have zero concern that he won't get going. So he will. It'll come. You just got to get his legs. Maybe for whatever reason right now, he doesn't have his legs. And when you don't have your legs, that's a tough thing. First of all, it's hard to keep up with this game at this level. And everything's out of sync when your legs aren't there. Mishkov will be fine. Again, if this was just a 5-game or 6-game blip in the middle of January or February, it would be part of a long season of ebbs and flows and hot streaks and cold streaks. But because it's starting the season, it gets exacerbated a little bit more. It gets more pub, but he'll be fine. He's a hell of a player, and you can still see the handle. The assist that he has on the goal that Konechny scores for his first against Seattle was tremendous because he obtains his zone up the right side. And then he's so patient, he waits for the trailer, which is Yegor Zamula, hits Zamula on a cross-ice pass perfectly in full stride. Zamula, a little shoulder fake to get a little more ice, gets down along the goal line and sends a perfect backdoor pass to Konechny for the tap-in goal. That play doesn't look like much. It's a secondary assist from Mishkov, but it's really good play. It's really good vision, and it's really good playmaking and development of a play. And sometimes being patient in the development of a play is the key, and that was on that situation. So I'm not worried about Matvei Mishkov. He'll be just fine. Great stuff. We'll get to more of these, like I said, coming up in subsequent episodes. So I sent out the tweet a little bit late. It was an idea I just came up with, and we'll get to some more of these as we go over the next couple of days. If you want to respond, you can always hit me up on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Jason Myrt. You can DM me there as well, or you can always shoot me an email, Jason, JASON.Myrtetus, MYRTETUS @gmail.com. And we'll get to audience interaction that way as well. Now, out in stores is Bullies, catching up with the Hound, the Hammer, and the Stanley Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers. Now, there's been a lot of books, stories, publicity over the years, 50 years, about the teams that won the Cup. We heard Ray Dinger talking about it a couple of weeks ago when he jumped on Flyers Daily. This one's a little different. This one was actually a book to make a TV show. Not a documentary, but a TV show. And it's got a lot of stuff that's never been discussed. So here's my conversation with former Flyers beat reporter Sam Carchidi. We're catching up with longtime hockey beat writer for the Philadelphia Flyers, Sam Carchidi, who's got a new book out called Bullies, catching up with the Hound, the Hammer, and the Stanley Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers. Hard to believe it's been 50 years, but it has. And there's a lot of untold stories and a lot of great stuff in this book. He joins us right now. Sam, how you doing?
Good, Jason. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
I'm sure this is a bit of a passion project as well. The story of the Broad Street Bullies has been told, but perhaps never like this.
Yeah, we'd like to think that. Jeff Hare and I actually started to put this together as a TV series. Jeff was 9 years old living in Roxborough when the Flyers won the Cup. I was a teenager when the Flyers won the Cup. So I think when you're younger, it really has more of an impact. Not that sports doesn't have an impact when you're older, but when you're between 9 and 20, I think it really lasts with you longer. So Jeff has now been a producer, does a lot of stuff for Lifetime, and he lives in LA. And we were actually working on a different project together. And, we started talking about the Flyers, and he said he always wanted to do something about the Flyers. And we kicked around the idea of doing a TV series, and because he has a lot of experience with that. And Susan Blanchard Ryan joined us. Her dad, Ron Ryan, was a Flyers president probably about 25 years ago. So she's an actress, an accomplished actress. So we have great people on both sides. People that really know the Flyers, and people know the inside out, in and outs, I should say, of not only the TV industry but the movie industry. So we, in the beginning, wanted to do this as a TV series, and we still want to do it as a TV series. We've written several episodes, and we've taken it to different studios in Hollywood. We came close with one of them, owned by Sylvester Stallone. So we're still plugging away. But in the meantime, we figured, why don't we pitch this as a book as well, and that'll accompany the TV series. We see this as a scripted TV series. In other words, not a documentary. That's been done before on the Broad Street Bullies, but we have actors and actresses playing Bobby Clark, Bernie Parent, the wives, Ed Snider, and on and on. And but we interviewed. We have like 1,000 pages of transcripts. Wow. I can't say enough about the Flyers of that era. They were just so cooperative and helpful, and I can't say enough about their kindness and their time. And we have 1,000 pages of transcripts, and it's like putting the puzzle together to make this hopefully a TV series down the road if we can sell it to one of the networks. And in the meantime, we have, we think, a great body of work in the book. And we had a great time doing it. Jeff's passion, he's a movie maker and a TV filmmaker, but his passion is the Flyers. And so we've had a good time. He's flown back several times from LA, and we did most of our interviews together, wow. With the players and Broad Street Bullies. And it just came out last week. So we're excited about it.
It's funny because like a lot of TV series, like I remember The Sopranos, like there's an arc to it, and eventually it's got to end because there's not enough stories to keep telling. You go 30 seasons with a TV series on this team, with the personalities and the complexities of those personalities, relationships, times, ups, downs, and all of it over an overarching period of time. It's been 50 years. Susan Blanchard Ryan, by the way, is in one of the oddly scariest movies I've ever seen, called Open Water, where she gets stuck in the ocean. Yeah, I saw it in the theater. It's still kind of the concept freaks me out a little bit.
It's still popular. I think that was made about 20 years ago. And in fact, I was down Ocean City last week, I guess, or a few weeks ago, and they actually sell a bottle of water that's called open water. And I said, is this copyrighted? I sent her. She lives in New York. I sent her a couple bottles of it, but
that movie freaks me out to this day. But I digress. One of the things that comes to light in this book is how they stumble across the name. We think Broad Street Bullies. It was just so obvious all these years later that that's what this team should be called. And we know how that came about with, playing St. Louis in the playoffs and Ed Snider making the vow to never be pushed around again. But coming across the name Broad Street Bullies was kind of happenstance.
Yeah, it was almost as an afterthought. Jack Chevalier covered the team for the Evening Bulletin at that time, and he was covering a game in Atlanta. Flyers won the game 3-1. A lot of penalties, tons of penalties in the game, some fights, and Chevy, as he was known, I actually worked with Chevy years later at the Inquirer, but Chevy called them the Blue Line Banditos, and he's packing up his stuff in the press box later that night. Again, this is way before the internet, so there's no
typewriter.
On his typewriter, there are no stories online, and you had to wait to read about it the next day. And lo and behold, Jack was second guessing himself. He said something about that. I just don't like this. And so he called up his copy editor, Pete Cofone, who's in Philadelphia at the Evening Bulletin on 30th Street. And he said, Pete, before you leave, can you change that? I don't really like it. And he changed it to the Bullies of Broad Street. And Pete said, I think that's much better. Right? I just didn't like the Blue Line Banditos, but, and Jack said, you should have said something. Why didn't you say something? And he said, well, they're your words and blah, blah, blah. So Pete Cofone then, in order to get the nickname to fit in the headline, changed the Bullies of Broad Street to the Broad Street Bullies. And voila, the first one. Crazy. In fact, I just posted that online the other day on the Twitter and Facebook, the actual story that had Broad Street Bullies, the first one. I had a copy of the newspaper, and I took a photo of it, and the very first one where that appeared. And the funny thing is, Pete Cofone lives out on the West Coast now in California, and he said to me that we never imagined that it would take off like it did, the nickname, or we would have copyrighted it. We never even thought to copyright it, and it's been used in probably thousands, maybe tens of thousands of items, from mugs to shirts to anything
globally.
Globally,
it's a global phrase. Yeah,
there's no question. Yeah, Joe Watson told me a story that a friend of his was in the Czech Republic in Prague, and he asked Joe's friend, said, I'm from Philadelphia. He says, oh, the Broad Street Bullies. And this was maybe 5 years ago. Yeah. So, the Broad Street Bullies nickname has been around for a little over 50 years. But, still 50 some years later, people in Europe, and like you said, all over the world know what the Broad Street Bullies is. Chevy, unfortunately, passed away. I guess it was in 2019. And we had a ceremony for him. Fittingly at the Broad Street Bullies pub, right down the street from Xfinity. And so it was a great tribute to a great man. Jack was a great writer. I mean, it's funny because all the stories he did over the years, not just on the Flyers, but he was on a great staff at the Bulletin with Ray Didinger and a lot of other.
I used to deliver the Bulletin.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah,
I put it on my sled and drag it through the streets.
Yeah,
when it was snowing. Yeah.
And you had the canvas bag.
Yeah, you had to collect on Friday. That was an arduous task. Yeah, and most people weren't home, but anyway, Jack was a great writer. He's known for the Broad Street Bullies, as is Pete Cofone because he altered it a little bit. But they're great newspaper people in their own right. Besides that.
Sam, the one thing is that's never really been talked about is the origin of why Ed Snider was so. I guess I'll use the word offended by being pushed around and his team being pushed around. And it goes back to when he was a kid, because
Yeah.
he was bullied as a kid from some anti-Semitic kids as a Jewish man. And, so he was never going to let that happen in his adult life because of what happened to him as a child. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I talked to a lot of Ed's children and grown children, of course, and they all thought that was really the origination of the Broad Street Bullies, was Ed getting bullied, as you said, when he was a 9-10-year-old kid growing up in D.C. His family owned a grocery store in D.C. and Ed was tortured, and it happened for a long time. And then finally he fought back and stood up for himself. And that's kind of what happened. I think you alluded to it earlier when you mentioned they got pushed around by the Blues. They got really pushed around the second year of existence. The first year they lost to the Blues in 7 games, hard fought series. The second year in the playoffs, they lose to the Blues in 4 straight.
Yeah.
And they were literally pushed all over the ice.
Yeah, physically manhandled.
Yeah, the Plager brothers and Noel Picard. I'm throwing names out there from the past, but they just brutalized the Flyers. And after that, Ed met with Keith Allen and said, this is never going to happen again. And Keith Allen says, Ed, you know better than me. You don't just snap your fingers and make a trade. And Ed said, no. I'm talking about long term. I'm talking about drafting players, bigger, stronger, meaner.
Philosophically, never going to happen again.
Yeah, and he also said, I'm not saying we don't want talent, but we want bigger guys. So that a couple of months later, they drafted Don Selesky, Dave Schultz. Bob Kelly had been here the previous year. He was part of the famed Broad Street Bullies. And, of course, that year they also happened to draft the franchise cornerstone. Along with Schultz and Selesky, they, of course, drafted Bobby Clark. And he was not known for his fighting, but he was known for his relentlessness, and he made things happen. And you could see Clark played right away. He came up, out of junior and joined the team right away. And a few years later, Schultz and Selesky, after some minor league training, they joined the team, and then they added Moose DuPont, who was a real big piece of the Broad Street Bullies. And but I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I mean, they were the Broad Street Bullies, and they didn't take anything.
Though.
They were so talented. I mean, even guys like Ross Lonsbury, who doesn't really get the attention he probably deserves, or Oris Kinderchuk, Billy Clement. I mean, these guys were like able to score 20 goals. Sometimes they did. And, even Selesky, Schultz scored 20 the year the Flyers won the Cup and had, some key game-winning goals in the playoffs. And he also did it in the finals against Buffalo. He scored 2 goals in a key win in Game 5. So these guys weren't just, physical players, but they had some talent to them too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. One of the big moments of the era of the prime of the Broad Street Bullies is obviously the Russian game, the Soviets and coming to the Spectrum, and the hit from Ed Van Emp, the Soviets leaving the ice and then finding out they weren't going to get paid, so they came back. And it was more than a hockey game. That was kind of a statement, a country fighting communism in a way. It meant more than hockey. And you guys got deep into that, obviously, and some fascinating stories surrounding what was a global event at that time.
Yeah,
nobody was beating that Red Army team.
Right. Nobody in the NHL had beaten them, and this was the last game of the tour. It was billed as the Cold War. And, we had uncovered some fascinating stuff. Like Lou Nolan talks about how he's at practice, and the Russians are getting ready to go on the ice, and they see him, and they give him some patches. And Lou had nothing to give them. They gave him some patches, hockey patches. And Lou reaches into his pocket. He worked at, I believe it was Fidelity Bank at that time. And all he had was some coins, and they happened to be Kennedy $50. So he gave them to some of the Russians, and they loved that. And one by one, they started to come out of the locker room. They're getting ready for practice. And some of the players pointed to Lou, and And Lou said, I don't have any more. So he went to the bank, and the next day he came back and gave them some more because they loved the Kennedy $50.
Yeah.
But the KGB apparently was there, and they got word of this, and they didn't like that. I mean, they didn't like Kennedy. So they thought, hey, what are you doing? And they
Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, and they confiscated all the $50, the Kennedy $50, which were, fairly popular at that time. And Lou said to this day, he doesn't know if they ever gave them back, if they took them, if they sold them.
Melted them down.
Right. But to me, the most interesting thing was that I didn't realize this until I talked to some different people, that Gene Hart, rest his soul, of course, the Flyers Hall of Fame broadcaster, Ed Snider approached Gene and said, look, we're going to have this big luncheon, going to introduce the Russians, our team, and I would like to introduce them. Now, Gene spoke fluently in Russian, and Ed said, can you teach me a little Russian? And Gene says, hey, we don't have much time. I don't know how much I can teach you. And Ed said, no, I don't need a lot. I just want enough for an introduction. Welcoming, maybe 1 minute. And Ed and Gene worked hard together. And to Ed's credit, he learned some Russian. He was going to introduce them. He thought it was a goodwill gesture. But that day, when they had the banquet, some of the Russians, according to some people that were there, were a little bit rude. And when they introduced Schultz, they introduced the Flyers as well. All the Russians are pointing at him and snickering. And then when they introduced Ed Van Impe, some of them started laughing. They thought Ed Van Impe looked really old, too old to be a hockey player. And they started laughing. And Ed was incensed to the point where he said, you know what? Forget these guys. I'm not going to introduce these guys, and he had prepared for this. And so I thought that was a cool element. And that was just leading up to what happened the next day, of course, when they played. And as you said, Ed Van Impe, with the famous elbow, he said he ran into my elbow, and the Russians walked off the ice, but the Flyers dominated that game, and a lot of credit goes to Fred Chiro because he challenged them to come into the zone. The Russians were used to making a pass, entering the zone via pass, not a dump and chase game at all. Yeah. But the Flyers stationed a lot of guys in the neutral zone and denied that, and the Russians weren't used to seeing that. And the Flyers, I don't remember the exact shots, but I think it was something like 46-12. The Flyers just dominated. And, they won the game 4-1, but it was really a lot more dominating than that. But and that really made the Flyers season. And for our TV series, we could have ended it in 1975 because that's when they won their last cup. But we wanted to include the Russian game. It had such an impact, as you said, globally. And we also wanted to include the last game because the last game of the season, the Flyers lose to Montreal in 4 straight. 3 of the games are 1-goal games.
By the way, in the Cup final in 1976.
In the Cup final, right? Yep. And the last game, Flyers lose by 2, but they're leading the game in the 3rd period. So every game they easily could have won. And by the way, they're missing Bernie Parent, Rick McLeish, and Gary Dornhofer. So that could have been, a different series. But Montreal, that was the start of their powerhouse reign.
They won 4 straight.
Yeah, that was the start of it all. Yeah. But anyway, we wanted to include that, and we will finish our TV series if it ever gets off the ground. Like I said, we have a lot of episodes written, but the fans stood up. The Flyers and the Canadians are in the handshake line, and they didn't want to leave. They just applauded. And Joe Watson said he started to skate off the ice and just stood there at the half courts. He wanted, they couldn't believe the love they were being shown. It was like they were being thanked for the 3 years of dominance. It was the greatest 3 years in Flyers history, maybe arguably the greatest 3 years in Philadelphia history. The only one that compares to it is the Philadelphia Athletics from 29, 30, and 31. And like the Flyers, they won 2 championships and then lost in the World Series in 1931. So that they're the only 2 eras that in Philadelphia sports history that you can compare as the greatest 3-year run. But the players are just taken aback, and it just shows the love that the city had for that team. And
Still does.
even today, 50 years later, they still
yeah.
do. Absolutely.
You know, it's funny, since they win the cup in 75, I have not been able to find a comparable, Sam, in any sport, because they lose to the Canadians, as we just mentioned, in 76, who go on to win 4 straight. That's a dynasty. Then they go back to a cup final in 1980. They lose to the Islanders, who win their first of 4 straight, a dynasty. Then in 85 and 87, they lose to the Oilers, who win 5 in 7 years, perhaps the best team to ever be put on ice. Then in 97, they get Detroit, who wins 3 in, I think, 5 or 6 years. That was the first of those years with Lidstrom and how great that team was. Then in 2010, they go back and they lose to the Blackhawks, who win 3 in 6 years. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I can't find a comparable in any sport. It's not who you play. It's not that you get there. It's not who you play.
Right. Like a lot of people say, you know, they are 0-6 in finals in 75. And, but like you said, they lost to dynasties. But when you look back to 2010, to me, they should have won. I mean, if they, you know, Niemi was bad in the finals, but unfortunately Leighton was worse, and Leighton was terrific in the semifinals. I always call it the cup semifinals. He had 3 shutouts against Montreal, but
5-game series.
That was the one. The 2010, they had all the momentum in the world after beating Boston, and that should have been the championship. I mean, that team was so good. It just took them longer to gel, and unfortunately, if they just get average goaltending, they win that cup. That to me, I agree with you. They lost to teams that were dynasties, but that to me hurts more than any of them, because I really think they should have won that cup. The other ones, it's just tough competition.
Yeah, and they lost, obviously, Barry Emery that season, and Bush, and it just crazy how Leighton even ends up in that position. But yeah, I remember living that one. It definitely still stings. The Broad Street Bullies and many team after had a second home, Sam, and it was a little place called Rexy's, and they spent a lot of time there. I imagine when you guys eventually do get this made into a series, there'll be a set design of Rexy's.
We hope so. Forbes Kennedy actually is the one that's credited. I think it was Billy Clement told me that Forbes, or maybe it was Joe Watson, that Forbes Kennedy, quote unquote, founded Rexy's. That was probably in the late 60s. And then by the time they were having their great runs, everybody on the Flyers, or at least 90% of them, were going to Rexy's. The guys who lived in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia area, somewhere in Pennsylvania, they didn't frequent it as much, but on Sundays they did, because back then the bars weren't open in the Philadelphia area on Sunday, so they all went over to Rexy's. But some of the players told me freely that sometimes they would eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner at Rexy's. Yeah. And back then, Fred Shero had practices at 9 a.m. and they were usually off the ice in Rexy's by 10:30. And then they would have, maybe a bite to eat at 2, and then they would eat dinner about 6 and then go home. But they would hang out with they were regular guys. And that's the beauty of the Broad Street Bullies, I think. They were just regular people, and they didn't put themselves on a pedestal. And I think that's why they were so beloved. I mean, when they came here, don't forget, there were a lot of questions on whether Philadelphia could support a hockey team. Yeah. They weren't able to on any level of pro hockey in the past. And, when they had their parade welcoming them in 1967, Joe Watson's famous for saying there were more people in the parade than were at the parade. There may be 20 people at the parade. People going by in cars were screaming at them and giving them the finger and saying, "Hey, we're going to be late for lunch. What are you doing? What's all this about?"
Blocking traffic.
Yeah. James Tate was the mayor then, and he invited them, and he didn't even show up at when they got to City Hall. He never even showed up. Wow. So it was crazy. And then 7 years later, 2 million people show up at the parade, the mother of all parades, until the next year when 2.3 million showed up. just to compare it a little bit, the Eagles drew, I've seen the estimates at 950,000 when they won their last Super Bowl. Well, the Flyers drew 2.3 million people. You have to remember, at that time, Philadelphia was a city of losers. The Sixers were 9-73. The Phillies and Eagles were perennially last place teams.
Yep.
So lo and behold, these Canadians come over and they take the area by storm. Down to earth guys, blue collar on the ice. They really identify with the Philadelphia area, and people fell in love with them and fell in love with this team. And as a result, you had so many people come out, and I feel bad for the fans of today. Hopefully things are changing.
Yeah.
And, people say, oh, Philadelphia's not a hockey city right now, but it can be a hockey city.
Yeah.
If you look at what happened in the 70s, the fan base is here.
No question about it. Ray Dinger on a couple weeks ago talking about his new theater production. He said those teams single-handedly changed the mindset of the Philadelphia sports fan. And 1980, where all four teams go to the respective final in their leagues, would have never happened had the Flyers not won those back-to-back cups. That was the importance of that, and really revitalizing it here in Philadelphia. The odd thing is Dave Schultz, the Hammer. We know how crazy he was on the ice and almost bloodthirsty. Hated to fight.
Yeah, he
what
did.
What a dichotomy that is, right?
Yeah, that really surprised me. I mean, he says, "What was I doing?" He said to me, "What was I thinking of?" Yeah. And but Schultz, to me, he is the face of the Broad Street Bullies because he gave this team courage, especially on the road. He gave them courage on the road. The Flyers drew capacity crowds every city they went to.
They're a spectacle. Yeah.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question. And Schultz was one of the main reasons for that. And it just surprises me because he is the one that transformed them. And again, we talked about the Barbers and the Clarks and McLeish and Leach and on and on. They had the talent, but until Schultz and Kelly and DuPont and Selesky and even the tough grinded out guys like Lonsbury and Ed Van Imp and Barry Ashby and I could go on and on. The Watson brothers. I mean, but Schultz helped give them all an identity. And Clarkey said we really needed that. And as a result, they became the most feared team in the league. But Schultz, he's had some tough times since then, but he's battled through them. And as did the late great Bernie Parent. They had some tough times off the ice when they retired, and they battled through them. And I think people will get some insights from both Schultz and Parent in our book that they never knew. They didn't realize some of the obstacles they had to overcome. And I can't give those guys enough credit.
Let's wrap up with Bernie. We just had his untimely passing, and I've credited Bernie for single-handedly being the one that first put hooks in my body with this sport and this team. And just because of that mask and, made me fall in love with the position. Then to get to know Bernie after his playing career, because I'm very young. I'm 3-4 years old when they're winning cups. I was born in 72 and didn't experience his career as even a semi-educated sports fan, let alone hockey fan at that time. But to get to know the person, they always say, well, the person, sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes because they can only let you down. Bernie accentuated it. And you're talking about a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest of all time. And there's a lot in this book about Bernie. Just tell me something about Bernie Parent that people didn't know, because I got endless amounts of time to talk about that man and what he did for me and what he's done for so many people and just the way he was.
Yeah. First of all, I'm like you and like
gutted.
Tens of thousands, 100,000 people, hundreds of thousands out there. Yeah, I'm gutted. And, you mentioned he was a Hall of Famer. He was also a Hall of Fame person. He is by far the number one athlete I have ever met for a positive attitude, for the way he carried himself. I mean, every conversation you had with him, when you left that conversation, you had a smile on your face. You felt good. Your day was going to be better. I mean, here's the kind of person Bernie was. He would text me on Father's Day and say, "Hey, just thinking of you. Hope you're having a good day." I mean, who does that? I mean, that is the essence of Bernard Marcel Perrant. And I talked to Bernie on the Friday afternoon. I'm sorry. He passed on overnight between Saturday and Sunday. So it was early Sunday morning. I talked to him that Friday, and I said, the Flyers are nice enough to have me do a book signing at Xfinity. And I was wondering if you'd want to come over with me. I said, because they would much rather see you than see me. And he said, whatever you need, just tell me, tell Ginny.
Always the answer.
The dates. I mean, that's the kind of unselfish person that Bernie was. And we all have a hole in our heart. I mean, somebody was so full of life, it just seems impossible that they're not here. Yeah. And, I mean, on the ice, he transformed this franchise. And believe it or not, it happened because he was traded. And he told me, he said, I cried like a baby. Yeah, I cried like a baby when I was traded. I didn't want to leave here. I had roots here. He had started his career, in essence, here. I mean, he played with Boston for, half of 1 year and maybe 40 games the other year. But the real start of his career was here. He and Doug Favell were very good goaltenders. They weren't great, but they were very good. They were solid goaltenders. But Bernie gets traded in a three-way deal. Rick McLeish comes here, and Bernie goes to Toronto. And he did say that in the back of my mind, I'm thinking the only good thing is that Jacques Plante is in Toronto. And he had always looked up to Jacques Plante.
That was his hero.
Yeah. That was his hero. And the funny thing is, Bernie, as a kid growing up in Montreal, lived next door to Jacques Plante's sister. You can't make this stuff up. They literally lived next door to Jacques Plante's sister. Bernie said, I'm 9, 10 years old. Whenever Jacques would come over and visit his sister, he and his buddies would hide in the bushes. They just wanted to get a glimpse of Jacques Plante, who was, the greatest goalie in the NHL at that time. And lo and behold, some, I guess 15 years later or so, 14 years later, now he's in Toronto and Jacques is his mentor. He learned so much from Plante during those 2 years there. And some of it was the preparation. Bernie said that he noticed Jacques had a notebook and he would pull it out before a game. And he said, what's that for? What are you doing? And he said, I study the tendencies of all the shooters. Yeah. And Bernie said, I never kept the book, but he did after that. He kept the book on all the shooters.
This guy likes to go high glove in this situation. He wanted to have that information. Advanced scouting, way before advanced scouting.
And the other thing was that Bernie was not really a good puck handler. Jacques was, and he studied how he handled the puck, and Bernie became a pretty good puck handler. Yep. But his moves, I mean, he had, you're a goalie. I mean, you know the reflexes. You can't teach that. Bernie had such great reflexes. Not a big guy, maybe 5'9", 5'10".
Yeah.
But his reflexes made up for, now the guys are 6'2", 6'3", some are even bigger. They have the bigger pads now, of course, and which they didn't have back then. And but Bernie, studied under Jacques Plante. When he came back, he probably had the best 2 seasons back to back, arguably in NHL history. Yeah. 24 shutouts in those 2 years. I mean, he was just phenomenal. Shutouts in each of the cup clinching games. And he credits a lot of that to Jacques Plante. And, Bernie would play 70, 75 games a year. And his last year with the Flyers, he had a .277 goals against and a .912 save percentage, which was good at the time. When he came back, he had a .189 goals against and a .932. .932 save percentage back in 74 just was unheard of.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Back in those days, if you had a 900, you're doing something special.
Yeah, this is before the modern art of goaltending. These numbers are off the charts. In those 2 years combined, he played 141 games went 91, 27, and 21 with a 926 and a 196 GAA. I mean, that's disgusting numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bernie, without Bobby Clark says it. I mean, a lot of people say Bobby Clark was the face of the franchise. And Bobby Clark told me, he says, without Bernie, we do not win 2 cups. And that's true. I mean, but sometimes Bernie was such a larger than life personality. I mean, if you went to an event, there was Bernie telling jokes. If the Flyers were together feeding the homeless, who was leading the charge? It was Bernie.
Yeah.
Any kind of charity event, he had a special knack for making people feel good about themselves. And when you read about the obstacles that he had to overcome, such a credit to him. And I don't think I ever saw Bernie happier than he's been in the last 9-10 years since he met Ginny, his wife.
Yeah.
And she really brought out the best of him, and they were just so good together. And my
inseparable.
Heart, really. And my heart bleeds for Ginny and the family and for fans out there and for people like us. I mean, there's a big hole, and it's going to take a long time before that void is filled.
I remember Bernie and I used to talk about at times the evolution of goaltending and the advantage the goalie has today of no fear factor. He would talk about, back then, and even when I started playing in the late 70s, our upper body equipment was basically like foam, So when you took a shot, it hurt.
Right.
The stuff you wear now, and the guys obviously can fire the puck, and if it catches you in the wrong spot, it can hurt. But when you take a puck to the chest, it doesn't hurt. When you took a puck to the chest, then it hurt. There was a fear factor in it as well.
Yeah.
With that old equipment, the deer hair pads and leather, and they could weigh a ton after a couple of periods and getting a little wet and all that. And the way he could move and the kick saves and the butterfly style is not in effect yet. The other thing about Bernie is people don't realize how good of a play reader he was. I mean, that's such a huge part of the game.
Right.
He could read plays to react, and that you don't think of that with the game back then, but he was an incredible play reader.
The funny thing is, he said he would relax in the afternoon, take a nap with his dog Tinkerbell, and then watch the Three Stooges. That was his way of relaxing. Yeah. But he said, but before the game, he would get nervous as hell, and he would throw up before each game.
Yeah.
And he said then he knew he was ready, but he still had the nerves, and which he thought was actually good because that meant he was game ready, and he would visualize the players, like you said. He would visualize a 3-on-2 or the play developing. He would visualize a Phil Esposito slap shot or the famous Ken Hodge slap shot that he stopped in the waning minutes to win that 1-0 cup clincher in '74. I mean, he said he looked at in his mind, he would visualize stuff before it happened, before the game started. And Dave Schultz, interestingly enough, said that he would visualize his fights before each game, and he said he hated that. He said, I would rather have been preparing, how to finish off a 3-on-2 break or something like that. But in my mind, I would look at who I'm probably going to fight that day, whether it's Terry O'Reilly or Keith Magnuson or whoever. And I would visualize what I was going to do to them, how I would grab them. And so he said he expended a lot of energy preparing for a fight. He said, I was a pretty good goal scorer when I played in junior. I wish I was, worrying about that. And but like I said, I know Schultz downplays the fighting now, but he really did give them courage on the road. But I think some people just think, a fight just happens, it's instantaneous, and bang, you go at it. But Schultz had a method and had a plan that he would follow. And it was kind of interesting to talk to him about it and talk to Bernie, how they prepared and different elements of the game. But, these guys made it all work. No question about it.
The last thing, these guys, they're the reason why the Flyers forever will be perceived either as a team that is loved or hated. There's nobody that's ambivalent on the Flyers globally. You go to Canada, there's a lot of Flyer fans in Canada, but there's nobody that's ambivalent like the Flyers. I really don't have that much thought about the Flyers. It's either you love them or you hate them. There's no gray area here at all. Yeah. And that's because of that era.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that Ed Snider would say, he would tell the players, look, if you're ever traveling somewhere and you like, say you're in Europe, say you're in France or whatever, and you see, or anybody connected to Flyers, not just the players, if you see somebody wearing a Flyers jersey or a Flyers they have a Flyers cap on, please let me know. He took such pride in getting that logo known all across Europe, all across the world, really. And of course, back then, Europeans were not even thought of to be in the NHL. In fact, the Flyers 1975 team was the last team of all Canadian players to win the cup. But then the influx of Europeans came in slowly, and then the doors opened. But but Ed Snider took so much pride in spreading the Flyers logo globally, and that really did happen.
No question about it. Sam, the book is out now. People can pick it up. It'd be great for a Christmas present or sooner. It's called Bullies: Catching Up with the Hound, the Hammer, and the Stanley Cup champion Philadelphia Flyers. Pick it up on Amazon and all the usual places, I assume?
Yeah, you can pick up in bookstores or Amazon, and just follow me on Twitter. We'll have some book signings, and I think we're going to be doing one at Xfinity. And before I go, I just want to say I'd be remiss if I didn't. That congratulations to you, and you're an inspiration to all of us. And I really can't thank you for what you did. You did a great service by posting things on social media about your courageous battle, and I just really wanted to commend you for that.
I appreciate that. It was one of those things where when I was diagnosed, I had to go, okay, what do I do with this? And I figured I had to go public, and I had to give it purpose, or else it wouldn't have made any sense. So I had to go public, and sometimes the details of what I went through, they're not pretty, but you got to be real. And so I decided to be transparent about it. And I've gotten so many notes from so many people that it has helped, or went and got a colonoscopy and avoided something. So that was the purpose for me. And that purpose doesn't end. That's going to continue now that I've been scanned and I'm cancer free, and I'll see where I go from here. Nothing's a guarantee, but I plan on following that path and talking to people about it and raising awareness and all of the things that go with it, because if you don't have purpose, you don't got much. So I had to make sense of it, and that was the logic I came up with. So I appreciate you saying that, and best of luck with the book, Sam. It's a tremendous story, and best of luck getting it made into a TV series. I know I'd be willing to watch, and a lot of other people, not just Flyer fans, to get these stories and see it play out on the TV or screens or wherever they can watch it on their devices and stuff. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
And, we'll be on the lookout. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks to Sam Carchidi for taking the time, and should be some really interesting stories in here. Some of the stories that we didn't talk about, Sam and I just now, that Sam and I had talked about off the air or before recording, are pretty epic. So check it out. Bullies, available now in source, would be a great Christmas gift for any Flyer fan. And it is true. The lack of ambivalence about the Flyers all over the world. People either love them or they hate them. You never hear somebody say, I really don't have that much of a feeling on the Flyers. That's kind of Philly sports in general, how it works for us. But hey, that's a good thing, I think. So thanks to Sam Carchidi. Thanks to you. Tomorrow we will preview Flyers on the road against the Ottawa Senators without Brady Tkachuk. Does Dan Vladar get a third straight start? Do they go to Sam Ersson, who celebrated a birthday a couple of days ago? Happy birthday, Sam, 26 years old. We shall see. We'll preview that game tomorrow and more on a brand new edition of Flyers Daily.